The warmth of the Christmas lights flickered across the polished wood table, but the cold in my dad's eyes was sharper than the December wind outside. His hand slammed flat against the table, making the silverware rattle, and then he ripped the photograph in half. It was the photo of me as a little girl between him and my late mother, the one that had been in our home since I was old enough to remember. The sound of paper tearing cut through the hum of holiday music. He looked at me with fury, and his words landed heavier than anything he had ever said before. "You are dead to me." I remember the weight of those 5 words pressing down like stones. My throat closed, but my eyes burned, and the lump in my chest swelled as if it might crush me. The air in the room went still, except for the sharp little laugh that slipped out of Linda, my stepmom, as if she had been waiting all night for this moment. She leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and smiled in triumph. My younger sister Sophia sat stiffly, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth, her face pale. She looked at me with wide eyes, but she did not speak. I tried to gather breath to say anything that might stop the avalanche, but before I could, my dad's chair scraped harshly against the floor. He was on his feet, face red veins standing at his neck. He pointed toward the front door. "Get out." His voice was low, final, like a slammed lid. I sat frozen for a second, searching his face for a sign of mercy, of the man who had once carried me on his shoulders through a county fair. I found nothing. My fingers trembled against the edge of my plate. The smell of roasted ham and cinnamon clashed with the sick taste rising in my throat. When I did not move, his hand closed hard around my arm. He pulled me up, chair legs screeching behind me, and shoved me across the living room. My boots skidded on the wood floor, the garland brushing my shoulder as he dragged me toward the entry. The front door flew open and cold air slammed against me. I stumbled onto the porch. Snowflakes stung my face like needles. Behind me, the door shut hard and I heard the lock turn. Linda's laugh carried through the wood, sharp and cruel. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the warm glow inside the house, where I no longer belonged. My breath came fast, little clouds in the air. The sound of carols muffled through the walls mocked me. I pulled my coat tighter, though it did little against the bitter wind. My body shook as I walked down the steps, my boots crunching in the snow. The night was quiet, except for the hum of a car somewhere in the distance and the muffled voices of neighbors tucked in their homes. At the end of the street, I stopped. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out the sounds of the night. I thought of the torn photograph, the image of my mom's smile split in two, falling onto the floor like trash. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I wandered aimlessly, turning corners I knew by heart, yet feeling like a stranger in my own neighborhood. The streetlights cast yellow circles on the snow. Each window I passed revealed families gathered together, laughter and clinking glasses. I pressed my lips tight against the ache in my throat. I wanted to knock on one of those doors to ask to be let in, but shame pulled me forward. I reached the bus stop at Elmwood and 9th. The bench was covered with a thin crust of snow, but I brushed it off with my glove and sat. The cold metal seeped through my jeans. I pulled my knees to my chest and buried my face in my arms. For a while, I just let the tears fall. They came hot, then froze on my skin. I remembered the last Christmas when my mom was alive. The smell of her cookies filling the kitchen, the way she sang along to Bing Crosby, her soft hand brushing my hair behind my ear when I helped her frost gingerbread men. She used to say family was forever no matter how hard things got. I clung to that memory as if it might keep me from falling apart completely. Hours blurred into each other. My hands were numb, my toes stiff inside my boots. The street grew quieter as night deepened. I thought of walking back, of pounding on the door and demanding he take back his words, but I knew it would be useless. He had chosen. He had erased me with a single sentence. Finally, I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket. The battery was low, the screen dim. I tapped it awake and my breath caught. The screen is filled with notifications. 23 missed calls. Everyone from Sophia. I swallowed hard and my hands shook as the phone buzzed again. I answered and her voice came fast and frantic. "Vivian, thank God! Are you all right?" Her breath sounded ragged, like she had been crying. "Dad was wrong. He was so wrong. Please come back." I bit my lip until I tasted blood. "I cannot," I whispered. "Not after tonight." There was silence, then a sharp inhale. "Then I am leaving too," she said. "I will not stay in that house another night." My chest tightened. "You cannot do that." "I can," she said, and she meant it. When she finally found me outside the Harbor Diner an hour later, her hair tangled from the wind, her eyes swollen from tears, I felt a flood of both guilt and relief. She dropped her duffel bag on the sidewalk and pulled me into a hug. For a long moment, we just stood there holding on to each other like lifelines. Inside the diner, the heat wrapped around us as we slid into a booth. The waitress called us honey and set down mugs of coffee. My hands shook as I wrapped them around the cup. Sophia's face looked too young for the determination in her eyes. "We will figure it out," she said. "We always do." That night was the first of many we spent without a home. We found a room above a closed barbershop with a radiator that barely worked. We worked shifts that left us little sleep but enough to scrape by. I carried the ache of loss like a stone in my chest, but Sophia's presence steadied me. Still, grief does not wait for permission. The night I lost the baby, I felt the world tilt under my feet. Pain ripped through me on the narrow stairs, groceries tumbling from my arms. Sophia's panicked voice echoed in my ears as she called for help. At Cleveland Medical Center, the nurse's eyes were soft as she said the words I did not want to hear. I lay staring at the ceiling, the fluorescent lights blurring through tears. The sound of paper ripping replayed in my mind, as if life itself had been torn in half again. Afterward, I moved like a ghost through the days. I folded donated clothes at the community center. I washed dishes at the diner until my hands cracked from soap. I tried to pretend I was whole. Sophia tried to hold me together, but some wounds seep no matter how tight you bind them. Then came Noah. He was 12, thin and quiet, with dark eyes that carried too much. He stood among the coats at the community center, as if measuring which one would fit his silence. A social worker introduced him, her voice gentle. He had been in and out of homes, she said. He liked fixing things. Radios, fans, anything broken. When he finally looked at me, something shifted. His eyes met mine, steady and searching. I saw in him the reflection of my own brokenness, and something in me whispered that maybe we could be mended together. Noah sat at the kitchen table with a broken radio between his hands, his small fingers working with a screwdriver that looked too big for him. Sophia leaned against the counter watching him, her face softened by a kind of hope I had not seen in her since the night we left Birchwood Lane. The radio gave a faint crackle and then static filled the room, followed by a burst of old country music. Noah's mouth curved into the smallest smile, not for us but for himself, as if proving he could make something broken breathe again. That was the moment I felt something shift inside me. The ache of losing my own baby had left me hollow, but seeing this boy mend a piece of junk and light up with pride made me wonder if maybe I had something left to give. He stayed longer each day after school, helping fold laundry or tinkering with the old fan that rattled in the corner. He never spoke much at first, but he watched everything. One night, when the radiator clanged and refused to heat, he climbed down with a wrench and adjusted something. 10 minutes later, warm air filled the room. Sophia and I laughed with surprise and clapped our hands. Noah just shrugged, but I saw the faint flush of pride on his cheeks. I began to ask him small questions. Did you like school? What subjects interest you? He always answered in clipped phrases. Math, science. Sometimes he drew diagrams in a notebook, boxes and arrows I could not follow, but that seemed to calm him. When I asked if he had ever thought about being an engineer, he looked up sharply and asked if that meant he would get to fix things. Nobody else could. I said yes, and his lips pressed into a line that might have been his version of a grin. The paperwork for fostering him was not simple. It took endless meetings at the community center and questions about income, stability, whether Sophia and I could provide a safe home. I sat across from the caseworkers and told them the truth. I did not have much, but I would give him everything I had. When they asked why I thought about that broken radio coming back to life, about his quiet eyes, about how my empty arms had ached for weeks, I told them that love sometimes finds you in places you are not looking. When the placement became official, Noah came into our apartment with one backpack and a cautious glance at each room. He chose the smaller bedroom without a word and lined his shoes neatly by the door. That night, as I tucked him in, I hesitated, unsure if a hug would feel like comfort or intrusion. He looked at me and whispered that I did not need to try so hard. I sat on the edge of the bed and told him I was not trying. I was just glad he was here. His eyes softened and he rolled over without answering, but I noticed the blanket pulled tight around his shoulders like armor. Life adjusted itself around him. Sophia teased that our kitchen had turned into a workshop. Old appliances from neighbors found their way onto the table, and Noah took them apart, labeling screws and wires with scraps of paper. He asked for books about circuits, so we found them secondhand at a shop downtown. He read late into the night, his face lit by a small desk lamp we bought at a yard sale. The quiet in our apartment no longer felt empty. It felt purposeful, like the hum of energy waiting to spark. One Saturday, we took him to Edgewater Beach. The air was brisk, the lake gray and restless, but Noah ran along the shoreline with Sophia chasing behind. I stood back watching, a memory rising of my dad carrying me on his shoulders through the same sand years before. The contrast nearly broke me. I pushed the thought away and focused on the laughter of my sister and this boy who was slowly becoming ours. When Noah ran back holding a flat skipping stone, he handed it to me and told me to try. I threw it clumsy and it sank immediately. He smirked and said I would have to practice. The sound of his teasing voice, light and easy, filled me with a hope I had thought was gone. School brought new challenges. His teachers called to say he was bright but distracted, often sketching ideas instead of paying attention to lessons. I met with them, sitting in the same type of office where my dad had once been called about me. This time I was the parent. I explained that he needed to be challenged, that he thrived on solving problems. One science teacher listened closely and later handed him extra projects. Noah devoured them, creating a small windmill out of scrap wood that actually turned when placed outside our window. When I saw it spin in the evening breeze, I felt my chest swell with something that was almost pride and almost sorrow for the child I had lost. Sophia became his ally too, helping him with writing assignments and coaxing him into sharing his thoughts. She told me late at night that she felt like we were rebuilding a family piece by piece. We laughed at how unconventional it was, two sisters raising a boy who had walked into our lives like fate. But in our laughter, there was a steadiness, a sense that maybe this was what family truly meant. Not blood alone, but choice and commitment. The years began to layer themselves like snow. Noah grew taller, his voice deepened, his curiosity only sharper. He collected cast-off gadgets from alleyways and thrift stores, turning our apartment into a museum of half-dismantled electronics. Once I came home from a shift at the diner to find the toaster blender and vacuum all in pieces on the floor. I started to scold him, but he looked up with grease on his hands and explained exactly how each machine worked and what he planned to improve. My irritation melted into awe. He was not destroyed. He was learning how the world was built. At 16, he talked about starting something of his own, not a lemonade stand or a lawn service, but a company that would make energy sensors for places nobody cared about. His eyes lit when he described small communities that paid too much for power, or factories that wasted energy they could save. He spoke with a passion that reminded me of my mom when she told stories at bedtime, her eyes alive with belief. I listened my heart tight and told him to keep dreaming big. There were hard times too. Bills piled high, the rent climbing faster than our wages. I took extra shifts at the hotel where I now worked as an event assistant, often coming home after midnight with aching feet. Sophia juggled clinic work and night classes. Noah tried to help by doing odd repair jobs for neighbors, fixing microwaves, replacing outlets, and saving every dollar. He left envelopes of cash on the counter labeled for groceries or gas. I would find them and cry quietly in the bathroom, touched and humbled that a boy once abandoned by so many cared enough to shoulder our weight. Through it all, I avoided Birchwood Lane. I never drove past the old house. Sophia and I agreed it was better to let the past rot in its own silence. Yet sometimes in winter, I caught myself staring at glowing windows on other streets and felt the ache return sharp and unyielding. My dad's words never stopped echoing. You are dead to me. They carved scars that even love could not erase. Still love grew. On Noah's 18th birthday, we stood in the harbor diner, where so much of our life had begun. The waitress who had once called us honey now knew us by name. We ordered pie with candles stuck into the slices. When Noah blew them out, he looked at me across the table and said softly that he wanted to keep my last name. My throat closed and tears stung my eyes. He signed the papers days later, officially becoming Noah Cole Parker. Seeing my name written in his careful hand was the closest thing to healing I had known since the night on that porch. By the time he turned 20, Lakeshore dynamics had taken shape. He and two friends rented a floor of an old warehouse near the flats, filling it with desks and whiteboards. I visited once and saw walls covered with formulas I could not decipher. He walked me through it patiently, explaining how their sensors could save thousands of dollars in wasted energy. His voice carried conviction, and when he called me Mom without hesitation in front of his colleagues, pride filled me so completely it left me trembling. Sophia and I sat together that night in our apartment, watching the local news run a short segment about young entrepreneurs in Cleveland. Noah's face appeared on the screen, serious and determined. They called him brilliant. My sister squeezed my hand. "This is your doing," she said. "Ours," I corrected. Life had a rhythm then, a fragile but steady beat. Work meals, laughter, the small triumphs of a family stitched together out of loss. But beneath it all, I knew the past was not finished. Some wounds wait years before they reopen. The first time I saw my dad again after all those years was not in person but on a screen. I was sitting on the couch late one evening, the television humming low, when a segment on local business closures came on. The reporter stood outside a shuttered machine shop, and behind him, for just a few seconds, I caught a glimpse of Robert Parker. His shoulders were hunched, his once broad frame reduced, his eyes darting like a man who wanted to vanish. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth, heart pounding so hard the soup trembled. For a moment I could not breathe. The man who had cast me out with 5 words now looked like a ghost wandering, a city that had moved on without him. I switched the television off and sat in the dark. The hum of the refrigerator was loud, the ticking of the kitchen clock steady. My hands trembled. I told myself I should not care, that whatever fate had found him was his own doing. But in the silence, memories crowded in. His laughter at summer barbecues, his rough hands pushing the swing higher, his voice calling me kiddo across the yard. Then the memory of Christmas Eve, the torn photograph, the snow under my boots. Love and pain tangled together until I could not tell which was heavier. The next morning at the diner, Sophia slid into the booth across from me. She studied my face the way only a sister could. "You saw something," she said. I nodded and told her about the news segment. Her mouth pressed tight, her eyes narrowing. She sipped her coffee slowly before speaking. "He made his choices. Do not let the sight of him unravel you." I wanted to believe her. Still, the image lingered like smoke. Life pressed on. Noah was busier than ever. Lakeshore Dynamics had just secured new funding, and his team celebrated in the warehouse with pizza and soda, their laughter echoing off brick walls. I stood in the corner watching him beam with pride, shaking hands with investors twice his age, and I thought about the night I had lost everything in a hospital room. This was the life I had built from ashes. This was proof that pain could be transformed. Yet the past had a way of seeping in through cracks. One afternoon, as I left work at the hotel, I spotted a figure near the entrance slouched against the brick. It took me a moment to recognize him. My dad. His coat hung loose, his hair grayer than I remembered, his eyes darting up when he saw me. "Vivian," he rasped. My name sounded foreign on his tongue. For a second, I froze, memories slamming into me. Then I turned and walked quickly to my car. My heart raced as I drove away, his voice still echoing in my ears. That night I told Sophia. She went still, her fork clattering against the plate. "Did he touch you?" she asked sharply. I shook my head. "No, he just said my name." She exhaled slowly, her anger simmering beneath her calm. "If he comes near again, you tell me. He has no right." I nodded, though deep inside a strange ache twisted. Weeks passed. Winter melted into spring. Noah invited me to his office to see the prototype of a new sensor. He explained every detail with shining eyes, his hands moving in quick gestures. I watched him, marveling at how far we had come. My son, though not by blood, was a testament to resilience. He called me Mom in front of his team, and I felt a swell of pride so deep it brought tears to my eyes. But the peace did not last. One evening as I walked home from the store, I spotted my dad again. He stood across the street near the lamppost watching me. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He did not move closer, just raised a trembling hand in a half wave. My chest tightened. I quickened my pace and ducked into the apartment building. My hands shook as I locked the door behind me. I leaned against it, breathing hard, the grocery bag slipping from my fingers. I told Sophia again, and this time her fury was sharp. "He is circling you like a ghost," she said. "He knows what he did, and now he wants something. But you owe him nothing." Her words were steel, but inside me doubt whispered, what if he was sick? What if he was alone? I hated myself for even caring. The tension built. At night, I dreamed of that Christmas table, the sound of paper tearing, Linda's cruel laugh. Sometimes I woke up with my fists clenched, heart racing. I wondered where Linda was now, if she still smiled in victory, or if she had vanished when the money dried up. I wondered if my dad lay awake, remembering the night he cast me out. Then came the day everything shifted. Noah was being honored at a downtown gala for young entrepreneurs. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the air filled with the hum of conversation and clinking glasses. I wore a simple black dress, Sophia beside me in navy, both of us beaming as Noah took the stage. He spoke with confidence, his words steady, his vision clear. He thanked his team, his mentors, and then he looked at me. He said, "Mom, thank you for believing in me." The room erupted in applause, and my heart swelled with pride so fierce I thought it might burst. When we left the ballroom, flashes from cameras lit the night as reporters crowded around Noah. I hung back watching him shine. And then in the corner of my vision I saw him. My dad stood near this curb, thinner than ever, his coat frayed. His eyes locked on me, then shifted to Noah. His lips moved, though I could not hear the words. He looked at my son with something like awe and desperation mixed. I turned away quickly, guiding Sophia and Noah toward the car. My pulse thundered. The past was no longer a shadow. It was standing in the street, staring at my future. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The sound of applause still echoed, but so did the memory of my dad's hollow eyes. I knew he would not stop. He had seen what I had built, and he would come. I rolled onto my side, pulling the blanket close. Sleep did not come easily. 2 weeks later it happened. I was in the kitchen stirring a pot of chili when a knock sounded at the door. 3 slow knocks, not urgent, not loud, but steady. My chest tightened. I wiped my hands and walked down the hall. Sophia appeared behind me, her eyes wide. I opened the door halfway. There he was, my dad. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "Vivian," he whispered, "please let me see my grandson." The words hung heavy between us. Behind me, the sound of Noah's laughter floated from the living room as he talked with friends on the phone. My throat tightened. Images crashed through my mind. The snow on the porch, the torn photograph, the nurse's gentle voice telling me my baby was gone. Noah's first smile over a fixed radio, his voice calling me Mom. "Who is it?" I said softly, though my voice shook. "Who is your grandson?" The question hung in the air, sharp as the cold night pressing in from the open door. His face looked older than his years, a map of lines carved by anger, regret, and sleepless nights. His breath clouded in the winter air as he stood at my doorstep, his shoulders sagging beneath a heavy coat that no longer fit. I gripped the edge of the door and stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest so hard it drowned out the faint sound of Noah's voice from the living room. For a long moment, neither of us moved. He blinked rapidly, his lips trembling like a man fighting both the cold and his own shame. "Please, Vivian," he whispered, "let me see my grandson." The words hit me like a hammer. My first instinct was to slam the door, to shut out the ghost of the man who had banished me into the snow with no coat and no mercy. But something in his voice, thin and cracked, held me in place. Behind me, Sophia stepped into the hallway. She froze when she saw him. Her face hardened, her eyes narrowing. She crossed her arms tight over her chest. "You have no right to be here," she said firmly. Her voice was sharp, stronger than mine had been. Robert's gaze slid to her. "Sophia, I have nothing left. Linda is gone. She took everything. I am sick. The doctors say I do not have long." The mention of Linda's name brought a bitter taste to my mouth. The woman who had laughed at my humiliation had vanished when the money ran dry. The image did not surprise me. Still hearing it spoken aloud made something twist inside me. My dad stepped closer, his voice hoarse. "Please, I just want to meet him. One time. That is all I ask." I shook my head slowly, words catching in my throat. I thought of Noah, his hands stained with grease as he fixed appliances, his boyish grin when he won an award, the way he leaned his head on my shoulder in the elevator. I thought of the night my dad had ripped the family photo in half, the night I had lost my baby, the hours I had sat at a bus stop with snow in my hair and shame in my chest. "Who is it?" I said again, my voice trembling but steady enough. "Who is your grandson?" He blinked at me, confusion flickering in his eyes. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Noah," he whispered finally. "He is your son, is he not?" The name on his lips made me flinch. He had learned of him somehow, maybe from the news coverage, maybe from gossip that traveled through old neighbors. I swallowed hard, keeping my hand tight on the door. Noah's footsteps echoed down the hall, then light and quick. He appeared behind Sophia, taller, now his hair falling into his eyes. He glanced between us, his brow furrowing. "Mom, who is this?" The word Mom, spoke in front of my dad, made my throat close. Pride and pain collided inside me. I turned slightly toward Noah, my voice soft. "Go back inside, sweetheart. Please." He hesitated, eyes flicking to the frail man on the porch, then back to me. Something in my face must have told him not to press, because he nodded slowly and stepped away. His voice trailed off down the hall, leaving only silence and the sound of my dad's labored breathing. Sophia took a step forward, her face fierce. "You lost your chance years ago. You tore this family apart and now you want a piece of it back. You cannot have it." Robert's shoulders slumped. He pressed a trembling hand against the doorframe as if for balance. "I made mistakes," he whispered. "I was proud, too proud to see past my anger. I was cruel. I am sorry." The words hung in the air, unfamiliar on his tongue. Sorry. I wanted to believe them, but they felt thin, like paper that could tear at the first touch. My chest tightened with the weight of memories. I remembered the sound of him slamming the door behind me, the way Linda's laugh had cut into me, the snow falling heavy on my shoulders. Sorry could not erase any of that. My hand tightened on the door. I shook my head, voice low. You said I was dead to you. You buried me with those words. You do not get to resurrect me now because you are lonely. His eyes filled with moisture, his breath catching. I know, he said, and I will regret it until I take my last breath. Sophia moved closer to me, her hand brushing mine on the door. We stood together side by side, two daughters who had been abandoned in different ways. She looked at him with no pity. You cannot come back after 10 years and expect forgiveness to be waiting. That is not how life works. His gaze darted between us, desperation plain. He whispered again, please, just a glimpse, just let me see him once. I thought of Noah in the other room, laughing into his phone, his future bright and unscarred by the bitterness that had poisoned my childhood. I would not let that darkness seep into him. I straightened my voice, steady now. No, the word closed the space between us like a slammed door, even though the door still stood open. He staggered back slightly as if struck. His hands trembled at his sides. For a moment I thought he might argue, might shout, might try to push past me, but he did not. He simply lowered his head, the weight of years pressing him down. He turned slowly, stepping off the porch into the snow. His figure hunched against the wind, shrinking as he walked down the street. I stood frozen, watching until the night swallowed him. My breath came hard, my chest tight. Sophia touched my arm gently. You did the right thing, she whispered. I nodded, though inside me emotions warred. Relief, sorrow, anger, grief. A storm I had carried for a decade surged all at once. I shut the door, leaning my forehead against the wood. My hands trembled. In the silence that followed, Noah reappeared at the end of the hall. His eyes were questioning, his face open and curious. Mom, he said softly. Who was that man? I inhaled slowly, searching for words that would not shatter the fragile peace we had built. My mouth opened, but no sound came. The weight of truth pressed heavy against my chest, waiting. Noah's question lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Who was that man? His eyes searched mine with the innocence of someone who had not yet learned that the people you call family can also be the ones who wound you the deepest. My mouth opened, but the words would not come. I felt Sophia's gaze on me, too steady and urging, waiting for me to answer. My throat ached as I forced myself to breathe. He was your granddad, I whispered finally, the words scraping raw as it left me. Noah's brows drew together. My granddad. Why did he look at me like that? I sat down on the couch because my legs had gone weak. The cushions sank under my weight, the familiar living room suddenly foreign. Noah stayed standing, his tall frame tense, his arms crossed as if bracing against a storm. I lifted my eyes to him, my voice trembling. There are things about my past I have not told you. Things that are painful, but maybe you are old enough now to know. Sophia lowered herself into the chair across from us, her face tight with worry. She shook her head slightly as if warning me not to say too much. But the moment had arrived. Secrets had a way of festering, and I could not let them infect the bond between us. I told Noah about that Christmas dinner years ago, the laughter that turned sharp, the photograph ripped in half, the words my dad had spoken that cut deeper than any knife. I told him about being cast out into the snow, about Linda's cruel laugh, about Sophia finding me hours later at the diner. I told him about the baby I had carried and the loss that nearly broke me, and then about the day I met him at the community center and how he had mended, not just radios but my shattered heart. His eyes darkened as I spoke, his jaw tightening. When I finished, silence filled the room. He rubbed a hand over his face and let out a long breath. So he threw you out. He called you dead to him. And now he thinks he can just walk back in and claim me. His voice was low-edged with anger. I swallowed hard. I did not want you to carry my burdens, I said softly, but I needed you to know. Noah's eyes met mine, fierce and unwavering. Mom, you saved me. You gave me a home when nobody else wanted me. He lost his chance the day he pushed you into the cold. He does not deserve a second one. The conviction in his voice brought tears to my eyes. Sophia nodded firmly, her hand reaching across the table to squeeze mine. He is right, she said. We cannot let him rewrite history. For days after that night, I carried a storm inside me. My dad's gaunt face haunted me, the tremor in his voice when he begged. I told myself I had done the right thing, yet guilt gnawed at me in quiet moments. I found myself staring at the torn edges of memories, the good ones mixed with the bad. I remembered him teaching me how to ride a bike, his laugh when I fell into a pile of leaves, his proud smile at my high school graduation. How could the same man have thrown me away like trash? Noah noticed my silence. One evening, he came into the kitchen while I chopped onions and set his hand gently on my shoulder. "Do not let him back in," he said softly. "You taught me what family means. You do not owe him anything." His words steadied me. I nodded, blinking back tears. But the past refused to stay buried. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was shaky, slanted, but unmistakably his. I hesitated before opening it, my heart racing. Inside, the words sprawled unevenly across the page. He wrote of regret, of mistakes he could not undo. He wrote of sleepless nights filled with memories of my mother, of me as a child, of the moment he had torn our family apart. He wrote that he was sick alone, and that all he wanted was to see me one last time before he died. My hands trembled as I folded the letter. I sat at the kitchen table staring at it until Sophia came home. When she saw my face, she knew. She picked up the letter and read it quickly, then tossed it down with a sharp exhale. "He is playing on your heart," she said coldly. "Do not let him." But I could not shake the image of him frail and dying. I lay awake that night listening to the ticking of the clock, torn between anger and pity. By morning, exhaustion clung to me like fog. Noah found me staring out the window with the letter in my lap. He took it from me, read it, and looked at me with steady eyes. "If you need to face him to close the wound, then do it. But do it for you, not for him. Do not let him take one more thing from you." His words pierced the fog. I nodded slowly. I knew I would have to see my dad one last time, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to look him in the eye and claim my own closure. Sophia insisted on coming with me. We drove together to the nursing home listed in the letter. The building stood gray and tired at the edge of town, its brick walls weathered, its windows dull. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. The hallway echoed with the shuffle of footsteps and the faint buzz of televisions behind half-open doors. We found him in a small room at the end of the corridor. He sat propped up in bed, his skin pale, his frame diminished. His eyes lifted when we entered, and for a moment I saw a flicker of recognition, of longing. "Vivian," he whispered. His voice was faint, like dry leaves rustling. I stood stiff at the foot of the bed, Sophia at my side. For a long moment, none of us spoke. My chest rose and fell with the weight of unspoken years. Finally, I found my voice. "Why now? Why reach out after all this time?" Tears welled in his eyes. I was wrong. I let pride and anger destroy what was left of our family. When your mother died, I did not know how to hold on. I blamed you for everything that went wrong. I thought casting you out would make me strong, but it only left me hollow. I am sorry. The words fell heavy in the stale air. I searched his face, looking for sincerity, for something real. All I saw was a broken man stripped of the power that had once made him cruel. My heart twisted, torn between rage and pity. Sophia's voice was sharp. "Sorry will not erase the nights we spent shivering in a cold apartment. It will not bring back the child she lost." He flinched at her words, his gaze dropping to the blanket. His hands trembled. "I know," he whispered. "Nothing can." Silence stretched. I took a deep breath, my voice low. "I built a life without you. I raised a son who carries my name, who knows love and dignity. You were not part of it. You do not get to claim him now." His eyes closed, a tear slipping down his cheek. He nodded slowly, his shoulders sinking deeper into the bed. "I understand." For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift slightly from my chest. Facing him did not erase the pain, but it returned power to me. I had survived, I had thrived, and he could no longer take that from me. We left the room quietly. The hallway seemed brighter than when we had entered. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky streaked with gold from the setting sun. Sophia squeezed my hand, her eyes soft. "You did it," she said. I nodded, feeling both exhausted and lighter. For years his shadow had followed me. Now I have faced it. The story was not over, but I was no longer afraid of its weight. The days after visiting my dad at the nursing home blurred together in a haze of emotions I could not easily name. Relief, grief, anger, exhaustion, all pressed against me like overlapping waves. At night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing again the rasp of his voice, the way his eyes had filled with tears when he spoke my name. I told myself I should feel lighter after confronting him, and in some ways I did, but the wounds of the past had deep roots. They tugged at me when I least expected, in the middle of folding laundry, or while stirring a pot of soup. Sophia noticed. One evening she came over with takeout, setting cartons on the table and watching me closely. "You have been quiet," she said. I shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "I am fine." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "No, you are not. I know you. You carry things until they break you." Her words pierced me because they were true. I sighed, resting my elbows on the table. "I just keep thinking about him, about the way he looked. Part of me hated him for asking to see Noah. Part of me saw a man who has nothing left. It is confusing. Sophia reached across and squeezed my hand. You gave him the truth. That is more than he gave us. Do not let guilt tie you back to him. He has to live with his choices. I nodded slowly, grateful for her clarity, yet my heart still twisted. Memories of my mother rose unbidden, the warmth of her voice, the way she tried to keep peace between us all. I wondered what she would have said if she had been alive that Christmas. Would she have stopped him, or would she have turned away? Meanwhile, Noah's life was accelerating. Lakeshore Dynamics was growing faster than even he had predicted. Investors called daily partnerships blossomed, and the media spotlight grew brighter. Our once quiet lives were now punctuated by interviews, photo shoots, and invitations to events that felt worlds away from the small apartment where we had once scraped by. One Saturday morning, Noah bounded into the kitchen, excitement shining in his eyes. "Mom," he said breathlessly, "they want me to speak at a conference in Chicago. Thousands of people, big names in technology." He grabbed a slice of toast and paced as he talked, his hands moving with energy. Pride swelled in me, but so did a pang of fear. He was stepping onto a stage larger than anything we had imagined. I wanted to shield him, to keep him close, but I knew this was his path. I smiled, trying to keep my voice steady. "That is wonderful, Noah. You will do great." Sophia, sitting at the counter with her coffee, grinned. "Just do not forget us, little people, when you are famous." Noah laughed, rolling his eyes, but I saw the way he flushed with both pride and embarrassment. As the conference approached, the house buzzed with preparation. Noah practiced his speech in front of me and Sophia, his voice confident, his words filled with vision. He stumbled once, and I caught the flash of frustration on his face. I reached out, touching his arm. "You do not have to be perfect," I said softly. "Just be yourself. That is enough." His eyes met mine, softening. "Thanks, Mom." The night before he left, I found him in his room packing. His desk was cluttered with sketches, notebooks, and half-built devices. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him fold shirts with a focus that made me smile. "Nervous?" I asked. He paused, then nodded a little. "What if I mess up?" I walked over and hugged him, the way I had when he was 12 and scared of starting a new school. "You will not. And even if you stumble, it will not matter. You are already proving yourself every day." He hugged me back, his chin resting briefly on my shoulder. "I love you," he said quietly. My throat tightened. "I love you too." The next day he flew to Chicago, and Sophia and I sat together on the couch watching the live stream of his speech. The camera panned over a massive audience, then zoomed in on him standing at the podium, a spotlight shining down. My chest swelled as he spoke with clarity and passion, his voice steady, his presence commanding. The applause at the end thundered through the speakers, and tears blurred my vision. When he returned home, I greeted him at the airport with arms wide. He looked exhausted, but exhilarated, his eyes sparkling. Reporters had hounded him, business cards stuffed into his pockets, and offers flooding his inbox. He laughed as he told us about it, but I saw the weight of it pressing too. In the weeks that followed, I tried to give him space while still being the anchor he needed. Fame and success had a way of changing people, but I prayed it would not change the boy who had once sat at our kitchen table, fixing a broken radio. One evening after dinner, Noah pulled me aside. "Mom," he said, his voice careful, "Dad showed up at one of my events." My heart stopped. For a second, I thought I had misheard. "Who?" He swallowed. "Your dad, my granddad." The world tilted under me. My pulse pounded in my ears. "What did he say?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Noah shifted uneasily. He just stood in the back, watching. Afterwards, he tried to approach me, but security kept him away. He looked frail. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. Anger flared hot and sharp. He had crossed a line. It was one thing to beg at my door, another to appear at my son's event. He had no right. Sophia's face hardened when I told her. "He is desperate," she said flatly. "Do not let him pull you in. He will use Noah now because he knows he cannot get to you." That night I could not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, fury and fear colliding. I imagined my dad's gaunt face in the crowd, his eyes locked on Noah, the hunger in them not just for connection but for redemption he had not earned. I resolved then that I would not let him entangle us again. Days passed, and I waited tense, expecting another letter or visit. But nothing came. Instead, news trickled through neighbors and old acquaintances. Linda had left him for good. His house on Birchwood Lane had been sold. He was living on scraps, dependent on charity. The man who had once sat at the head of the table, booming with authority, had been reduced to a shadow. One Sunday morning, I walked to the park near our home. The air was crisp, the trees bare, children laughing on the swings. I sat on a bench watching families pass, feeling both gratitude and grief. I had built something from nothing, but the scars remained. As I sat there, a memory rose of my dad pushing me on a swing in that very park when I was small. His hands had been steady, then his laugh warm. The memory was so vivid it stole my breath. I pressed my palms together, whispering to myself, he chose his path. I chose mine. Yet part of me still ached. Not for him, but for the family we could have been. For the mother who had held us together. For the years lost to pride and cruelty. I wiped my eyes and stood walking slowly back home. When I opened the door, Noah looked up from the kitchen table, papers spread before him. He smiled, weary but bright. Mom, he said, I think I am ready to take Lakeshore to the next level. Investors want me in New York. My heart squeezed at the thought of him leaving, of his wings spreading farther. I smiled through the ache. You are ready, I said. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You sure you will be okay? I laughed softly. I have been through worse. Go chase your dreams. Sophia joined us, her hand resting on my shoulder. We are proud of you, she told him. As the evening stretched, laughter filled the house. Yet even as I smiled, a shadow lingered at the edge of my thoughts. I knew my dad would not disappear so easily. He had already knocked, once already stood at my door, already tried to reach Noah. And I sensed deep down that his story in my life was not finished. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late March, tucked between a stack of bills and a glossy flyer from the grocery store. I almost missed it, but the shaky handwriting on the envelope caught my eye. My name scrawled across the front in a pen that had blotted at the edges. I knew instantly it was from him. My hands trembled as I carried it inside, laying it on the counter like it was something that might burn me. For hours, I avoided it, moving through the motions of cooking dinner, folding laundry, checking my phone. But every time I glanced at the counter, the envelope was still there, waiting, insistent. When Noah came home later that evening, he noticed immediately. What is that, Mom? His eyes darted to the envelope, suspicion in his voice. I swallowed hard. A letter. From him. The words tasted bitter. Noah's jaw tightened. He reached for the envelope, but I pulled it back. No, I said softly. Let me. He hesitated, then nodded, watching me closely as I finally slid my finger under the flap and unfolded the paper inside. The writing was just as shaky as the envelope, the words cramped as if written with effort. Vivian, it began. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I know I have wronged you beyond repair, but I am sick and alone. Linda is gone. The house is gone. I am in a shelter now. I wanted to see you one last time before my time runs out. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears, though not the kind that came from compassion. It was anger and exhaustion, mixed with a sorrow so old it felt like part of my bones. I set the letter down and pressed my hands to my face. Noah's voice was tight. He has no right to ask you for anything. I know, I whispered. I know. Sophia called later that night, her voice trembling when I told her about the letter. She said she had heard whispers that our dad had been seen at the church food pantry, his health visibly failing. She asked if I would go see him. I hesitated, torn between the urge to slam the door forever and the tug of something I could not name. That week I carried the letter folded in my purse, touching it sometimes without meaning to. Each time it felt like a weight dragging me back into the past. At work, I moved through tasks, distracted my mind replaying his words. Sick. Alone. Time is running out. The memory of him standing in the snow, shouting that I was dead to him, warred against the image of him frail and broken. Finally, on Saturday morning, I told Sophia I would go with her. We drove together through gray streets, the sky heavy with clouds. My stomach churned as we pulled up to the shelter, a brick building with peeling paint and a sagging awning. People lingered outside, smoking their eyes, tired and wary. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. A woman at the desk looked up as we entered. Can I help you? Sophia spoke softly. We are here to see Robert Parker. The woman nodded, her face kind but weary. She led us down a narrow hall lined with cots and worn blankets. At the far end, in a small room with 2 chairs and a metal table, he sat waiting. My breath caught when I saw him. His hair had thinned to wisps, his skin gray, his body shrunken inside a faded jacket. He looked up, and for a moment confusion flickered before recognition dawned. Vivian, he rasped, his voice barely audible. I stood frozen in this doorway, every muscle tense. Sophia nudged me gently, and I stepped inside. He tried to rise, but his legs shook and he sank back into the chair. I took the seat across from him, my heart hammering. He stared at me, tears welling in his eyes. I am sorry, he whispered. The words that had never come before now spilled out weak and broken. I shook my head slowly. Sorry does not erase what you did. He flinched, nodding. I know, but I have nothing left, and I wanted to see you. To see Noah. At the mention of Noah's name, my body stiffened. "You do not get to ask for him," I said sharply. "You lost that right years ago." His shoulders sagged, his head bowing. "I know," he murmured. Sophia's hand gripped mine under the table, steadying me. The silence stretched until I finally asked, "Why now? Why after everything?" He looked up, his eyes hollow. "Because I am dying. And because I see her in my dreams, your mother. She tells me to make peace before it is too late." My throat tightened, my mother's face flashing in my memory. Her gentle eyes, her soft voice. Anger surged again. "Do not use her. Do not speak her name as if it absolves you." He wept quietly, then shoulders shaking, his frail frame crumbling before me. I left the shelter that day with my heart heavier than before. Sophia cried quietly beside me as we drove home, saying she did not know what to think anymore. I told her I did not either. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the letter again. Noah came in, his face tense. "Did you see him?" I nodded. "He is sick, Noah." "He has nothing." Noah's eyes blazed. "He chose that. He threw you out. He tried to erase you. Now he wants you back because he is weak. Do not give him that satisfaction." I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "I will not let him hurt us again." But part of me wondered if seeing him crumble was its own form of justice. Weeks passed and his letters kept coming. Some short, a few lines of regret, others longer, filled with memories of my childhood, moments I had almost forgotten. The time he taught me to fish, the day he carried me home after I scraped my knee. Reading them was like reopening a wound that had half healed. One evening, Noah found me with a letter in my hands, tears slipping down my face. He grabbed the paper, crumpled it, and threw it in the trash. "Stop letting him in, Mom, please." I wrapped my arms around him, feeling his strength, the man he had become. I whispered that I would not let the past steal from our future. But deep inside, I knew the story was not finished. My dad was fading, yet he was still there, his presence lingering like a shadow. I had a choice to make, one that would shape not only how I remembered him, but how I carried myself forward. As spring warmed into summer, Noah's company soared higher, investors pouring in millions, headlines praising his vision. My pride grew with each article, each phone call. Yet always in the quiet of night, the memory of my dad's frail voice haunted me. "Help me," he whispered. And though my anger was still raw, I could not silence the echo of those words. The day came when Sophia called me in tears. "He is in the hospital," she said, her voice breaking. "The doctors do not think he has long. You need to decide if you will see him one last time." I sat in silence, the phone pressed to my ear, my heart pounding. The weight of decades bore down on me, the memory of snow under my boots, of a locked door, of Linda's cruel laughter, and now the image of a man at the end of his life, stripped of everything. I whispered to Sophia that I would think about it, then hung up, my hands trembling. Outside, the evening sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. I stood at the window, watching the light fade, torn between the past and the present, between fury and forgiveness. The choice lay before me, and no one else could make it. The phone call from Sophia lingered in my ears long after we hung up. "He is in the hospital. He does not have long." Her voice had carried both urgency and sorrow, but also something else, something that sounded like pleading. I stood at the kitchen sink, hands braced against the counter, staring out the window at the fading daylight. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence while my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. Instead, I stood frozen, caught between the memories of a dad who had locked me out into the snow and the vision of a man lying weak in a hospital bed. That night I barely slept. I tossed and turned, the sheets tangling around me, dreams half-formed and broken. In one, I was a child again, running through the yard with my mother's laughter behind me. In another, I was at the Christmas table, his voice booming as he said those words that shattered me. "You are dead to me." I woke with sweat dampening my skin, my chest aching as though the words had been spoken again in the darkness. By morning, I decided I could not face the choice alone. Over coffee, I told Noah what Sophia had said. His reaction was immediate. "Do not go, Mom." His voice was firm, his eyes blazing with protective anger. "You do not owe him anything, not after what he did to you." I rubbed my forehead, exhausted already. "I know. But if I do not go, will I regret it later? Will I always wonder what he might have said, what I might have said back?" Noah shook his head sharply. He made his bed. "Let him lie in it." Sophia called again that afternoon, her voice shaky. "He keeps asking for you," she said. "His voice is weak, but he says your name." I pressed my lips together, closing my eyes. I told her I was not sure yet, and I heard the disappointment in her silence before she said she understood. The days slipped by in a blur of indecision. At work, I moved like a ghost, setting up conference tables and arranging catering orders, my hands going through motions while my mind replayed every scene of the past. The locked door, the sound of Linda's laugh, the way his eyes had burned with hatred, and yet the way he had looked frail in that shelter, his shoulders bowed, his hands trembling. Finally, one Friday evening, I drove to the hospital. I did not tell Noah. I could not bear to see the disappointment in his eyes. Sophia met me in the lobby, her face pale but relieved. She hugged me tightly, whispering thank you against my shoulder. We walked down the hall together, the sterile smell of disinfectant and the soft beeping of machines surrounding us. When we reached his room, I stopped at the door. My hands trembled, my knees felt weak. Through the glass, I saw him lying in the bed, his skin gray, his chest rising and falling shallowly. For a moment, I could not breathe. Sophia touched my arm gently. It is okay. I stepped inside slowly, each footfall heavy. His eyes fluttered open and then widened when they landed on me. For a moment, he looked almost like my dad again. Not the broken man he had become, but the one who had once lifted me onto his shoulders at the fair. His lips parted and he rasped my name. Vivian! I froze at the sound. He reached a trembling hand toward me, but I did not move closer. I stood at the foot of the bed, my heart in my throat. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I'm sorry," over and over, the words stumbling out of him like a broken prayer. I wanted to shout to remind him of the years he had stolen, of the Christmas night he had cast me out like I was nothing. Instead, I stood in silence, my hands clenched at my sides. Sophia sat quietly in the chair by his bed, tears running down her cheeks. He tried to lift himself up, but his strength failed. His chest rattled with a deep cough, and I could see the effort it took just to breathe. He whispered again, "Help me!" I closed my eyes, the words slicing through me. That night I left the hospital, shaken, my mind torn in two. On one side was the anger that had sustained me all these years, the knowledge that he had chosen cruelty over love. On the other side was the sight of him so fragile, stripped of all power, begging like a child. I drove home with tears streaming down my face, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Noah was waiting when I walked in, his face tense. "Where were you?" His voice was sharp, but beneath it was fear. I sat heavily on the couch, unable to lie. I went to see him. Noah's eyes filled with hurt. Why I whispered the truth? Because I had to see for myself. Because I needed to know. He sat beside me silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "If you forgive him, I will never understand." I looked at him, my son, my pride, the reason I had survived. I shook my head. I do not know if I can forgive him, but I cannot pretend he does not exist either. The following week, I visited again. Each time I stepped into the room, he seemed weaker, his words fewer, his eyes more distant. Sometimes he spoke of the past, fragments of memories spilling out. The day he taught me to fish, the time he drove me to my first school dance. He spoke of my mother, too, his voice breaking as he said her name. I sat stiff, listening, my heart both aching and hard. One afternoon, when the sky outside the window glowed pink with sunset, he whispered, "Do you hate me?" The question pierced me. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Finally, I said softly, "I hate what you did. I hate how you broke me." He nodded, faintly, tears slipping from his eyes. "That is enough," he murmured. Sophia often stayed late with him, holding his hand, reading to him. I admired her strength, but also worried for her heart. She still carried hope, even after all the years of pain. I envied her ability to see good where I saw only ruin. As summer deepened, the hospital became a second home. The nurses nodded when I arrived, their smiles kind but pitying. I learned the rhythms of the machines, the schedule of medications, the sound of his breathing in the dark hours of evening. Yet even as I sat by his side, my anger remained. Some nights I would drive home shaking with fury, remembering the girl I had been, standing in the snow with the door locked behind me. That memory was carved into me, unerasable. No apology could undo it. Still, each time I looked at him, frail and fading, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not love, but perhaps a kind of release. He no longer had the power to wound me. His cruelty had already run its course. Now he was just a man broken by his own choices. The last time I saw him consciously, he whispered my name and then said, "Thank you for coming." His eyes closed soon after, and though he still breathed, he did not wake again. I sat by his bed long into the night, Sophia asleep in the chair beside me, the room filled with the hum of machines. I thought of all the years lost, all the words unsaid. I thought of Noah's face, his strength, the life I had built in spite of it all. When I finally left, the hallway was quiet, the lights dim. I walked slowly, my footsteps echoing. Outside, the air was cool, the summer night filled with the scent of cut grass. I stood in the parking lot looking up at the stars and felt a strange calm settle over me. For so long I had carried the weight of his rejection, the sting of his words. But as I stood there under the night sky, I realized that weight was no longer mine. Whatever happened next, his story was ending. Mine was still unfolding. The call came just after dawn. The ring of the phone jolted me from a restless sleep, and for a moment I thought it was a dream. But when I fumbled for the receiver and pressed it to my ear, I heard Sophia's voice, hushed and trembling. "Vivian," she said, "he is gone." I sat up in bed, the sheets falling to my lap, my chest tightening. The room was still dark, the faint light of morning creeping through the blinds. For a long moment I could not find words. I only listened to the sound of my sister breathing on the other end of the line. "I will be there," I whispered finally. The hospital smelled the same as before, sharp and sterile, the air humming with machines and murmured voices. When I entered his room, the bed was already empty. A folded sheet, a silent monitor, the blinds pulled halfway closed. Sophia sat in the chair by the window, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face pale. She looked up when I came in, her eyes red. "It was peaceful," she said softly. "He did not suffer at the end." I nodded, though a storm churned inside me. Peaceful. I thought of that Christmas night, the slam of the door, the sound of my sobs muffled by falling snow. I thought of the words that had cut me so deeply I could still feel them like scars. Peaceful was not the word I would have chosen. Sophia rose and hugged me tightly. We stood like that for a long time, two daughters who had been broken in different ways, now bound by the finality of loss. When we pulled back, she wiped her cheeks and whispered, "The funeral will be small." He did not have many people left. I thought of Linda, long gone. Of the friends who had once filled our house with laughter but had drifted away when his pride consumed him. Of neighbors who had stopped waving, colleagues who had turned their backs. The man who had once commanded every room now left behind almost nothing. The following days were a blur of arrangements. Sophia and I met with a pastor, selected a casket, and chose a quiet cemetery plot. The funeral home was modest, the flowers sparse, the pews half empty. When I stood at the back and looked out over the room, I counted fewer than 20 people. Some old work acquaintances, a couple of distant cousins, one neighbor from Birchwood Lane, who still remembered him before he hardened into stone. Noah sat beside me, his tall frame rigid, his jaw set. He had refused at first to come, but finally agreed, saying only that he wanted to stand by me. I was grateful for that, though I could see the resentment burning in his eyes. The service was brief. The pastor spoke of forgiveness, of the inevitability of death, of the hope that broken families might find healing in the shadow of loss. His words washed over me like a tide, but I could not absorb them. I sat in silence, my hands gripping the edge of the pew, staring at the casket. I felt no tears, only a strange numbness. Afterward, at the graveside, the air was cold and damp, the sky heavy with gray. I stood with Sophia as they lowered the casket into the earth. The thud of soil hitting the lid echoed in my chest. My breath came shallow, my heart tight. I waited for some flood of emotion, some sense of release, but all I felt was emptiness. People approached afterward, offering quiet condolences. A neighbor touched my arm and said she remembered me as a child, riding my bike up and down Birchwood Lane. I smiled faintly, murmured thanks, and watched her walk away. When the crowd thinned, Noah turned to me. "He deserved none of this," he said sharply. "He hurt you, he abandoned you, and now everyone pretends he was a good man." His voice trembled with anger. I touched his arm gently. "It is not about him anymore," I whispered. "It is about us, about how we choose to carry forward." His eyes softened slightly, though the fire still burned. That night back at home, Sophia and I sat at the kitchen table long after Noah went to bed. We shared stories of our childhood, fragments of moments when our family had felt whole. The summer picnics by the lake, the smell of our mother's pies cooling on the windowsill, the way Dad had once swung us in the yard, his laughter booming. We let the memories spill out, both the sweet and the bitter, until our eyes blurred with tears. Sophia finally whispered, "I wish he had been the man he could have been." I nodded, my throat aching. Me too. In the weeks that followed, I tried to settle back into routine. Work, laundry, meals, the rhythm of ordinary life. But everywhere I turned, I felt echoes of him. Passing Birchwood Lane one afternoon, I slowed the car and stared at the house. The porch where I had once stood shivering was now painted a fresh blue. A new family lived there. Children's toys littered the yard, their laughter spilling through the air. The sight pierced me. That house had been the scene of my greatest wound, but now it belonged to people who knew nothing of the ghosts inside its walls. I drove away with tears in my eyes, realizing that time erases in ways we cannot control. Noah threw himself deeper into his work, perhaps as a way to escape the heaviness that had settled over us. Lakeshore Dynamics was expanding to new cities, investors pouring money into projects that once seemed like distant dreams. I watched him with pride, but also with a quiet fear that he was carrying too much. One evening, I found him at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, papers spread around him. He looked up, exhaustion in his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "I do not want to be like him. I will not be like him." My chest tightened. "You are not," I said firmly. "You never could be." He nodded slowly, and I knew he believed me, though the shadow of my dad's legacy still loomed in his thoughts. Sophia visited often, her presence steady, her laughter a balm. We cooked together, shared bottles of wine, and talked late into the night. Sometimes she asked if I regretted visiting him at the end. I always paused before answering. Finally, I would shake my head. No, I would say, because I needed to see that he was only a man. Not a monster, not a god, just a man broken by his own choices. Still, the image of him in that hospital bed haunted me, not out of pity, but as a reminder of how pride can hollow a person until nothing remains. I carried it with me as a warning, a lesson etched into my bones. Life slowly found its rhythm again. Noah traveled more for work. Sophia found new joy in volunteering at the clinic, and I kept building the quiet life I had fought for. But sometimes at night, when the house was silent, I would hear his voice in my head. "You are dead to me." And then I would hear my own reply, steady and strong. "I am not. I was alive. I had survived." And no matter how many ghosts lingered, I knew I would keep moving forward. The first Christmas after my dad's death came faster than I was ready for. The streets were strung with lights, shop windows filled with wreaths and bows, and carols played in every store. For years that season had been poisoned for me, a reminder of the night he ripped a family photo in half and cast me into the snow. But now, for the first time, I found myself standing in front of our own tree with Noah and Sophia, the smell of pine filling the room, and I felt something shift. The memory of loss was still there, sharp as glass, but layered now with laughter and warmth. Noah had insisted on a real tree. He and Sophia wrestled it into the living room, pine needles scattering across the floor while I fussed with the stand. He hung the lights, Sophia unwrapped old ornaments, and I stood back watching them argue over where to place the angel. Their voices overlapped, their laughter spilling into the air, and I thought of how different it all was from the silence of my dad's house at the end. Later that evening, we sat around the table with hot cocoa, the lights twinkling behind us. Noah leaned back in his chair, his long legs stretched out, his voice thoughtful. "Mom," he said, "I keep thinking about how far we have come. From that tiny apartment with the rattling radiator to this." He gestured at the tree, the house, the life we had built. His eyes softened. "You gave me everything." My throat tightened, my hands wrapped around the warm mug. I wanted to tell him that he had given me everything too, that he had filled the emptiness I once thought would consume me. Instead, I reached out and squeezed his hand. "We gave each other everything," I whispered. The holidays passed and life moved forward. Noah traveled often, his company expanding into new states, his face appearing in magazines and on television. Sophia teased him about being famous, but I could see the pressure wearing on him. One night, when he came home late, he collapsed onto the couch with a heavy sigh. I asked what was wrong, and he buried his face in his hands. "Sometimes I feel like I am carrying the weight of the world," he admitted. I sat beside him, rubbing his back the way I had when he was a boy. "You do not have to carry it alone," I said softly. "You have me, you have Sophia, you have a team who believes in you." His shoulders relaxed slightly, his breathing steadied, and for a moment I saw the child in him again. Spring came with new beginnings. Sophia started dating a man from the clinic, a gentle soul who made her laugh easily. Watching her smile again filled me with joy. We had walked through fire together, and seeing her find happiness was like watching a wound finally close. She told me one evening over wine that she had never thought she would get a second chance at love. I told her she deserved it more than anyone I knew. For myself, I did not seek romance. My heart had been too battered, too focused on survival, too busy raising Noah and piecing together the fragments of my life. Yet sometimes in quiet moments, I allowed myself to dream of companionship. Not the kind that sweeps you off your feet, but the steady kind, the kind that sits with you on the porch in the evening and shares a cup of tea. One Sunday afternoon, I visited the cemetery. The grass had begun to grow again, small flowers sprouting near the headstones. I stood before my dad's grave, the stone simple, the ground still fresh. I placed a small bouquet of daisies at the base and stood in silence. My feelings were complicated, tangled knots of pain and anger, but also something quieter. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps acceptance. He was gone. His choices had carved scars into my life, but they no longer defined me. As I stood there, I whispered aloud, "I am still here. I survived. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying my words away. Driving home, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not healed, not whole, but freer. That summer, Noah hosted a celebration for his company's success. The ballroom was filled with lights and music, people in suits clinking glasses, laughter rising into the air. I stood with Sophia, watching him on stage as he spoke with confidence and gratitude. He thanked his team, his investors, and his mentors. Then he looked directly at me. And he thanked his mom for teaching him that broken things can be fixed, and broken lives can be rebuilt. The applause thundered, and I felt tears spill down my cheeks. Later, when the music played and people danced, Noah came to me. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into a hug that spoke louder than any words. For a moment, it was just us, mother and son, two people who had stitched each other's wounds. At that moment, I understood something. My dad's legacy did not end with me. It ended with Noah, with Sophia, with the life we had created. We had chosen love where he had chosen pride. We had chosen to build instead of destroy. That was our inheritance, and it was stronger than the pain he left behind. As the evening wore on, I thought of the women who might one day hear my story. Women who had been cast aside, betrayed, abandoned. I wanted them to know that survival was possible, that dignity could be reclaimed. That family was not just blood, but the ones who chose to stand with you in the storm. If you are listening now, I want you to know something. No matter what someone has said to you, no matter who has tried to bury you, you are not dead. You are alive. You can rebuild. You can create something stronger than what was taken. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. If this story touched you, if you saw yourself in its pages, I would love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. Like this story if it resonated with you, and subscribe so we can walk together through more stories of survival, justice, and healing. Your voice matters here, and I would love to hear it.